Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I was looking up on your profile yesterday, like about your work and everything. So the first thing which I really want to say is that the way you speak, the way you articulate, it's commendable. Like the way you because the passion you have when you talk to people about your stuff, it's crazy. Like when I was watching your TEDx talk, it's like you need a great amount of skill to speak at TEDx, right? You know, like you need to hold on attention for people. I don't know how much they edited, how much that it
wasn't edited at all.
Yeah, so it's difficult.
So you want to talk a little TEDx right now?
Yeah,
okay,
sure,
So
please go on.
I've done 2 TEDx talks. The first one was more of a it was still a TEDx talk, but it was a little bit different. This last one was very formal, audience of 300, 400 plus people in the room. Yeah. And I love them because unlike a traditional presentation, say I'm presenting to a conference or a corporation, I've got slides and I can lean on the slides. I can turn to the slides. TEDx, it's me, the mic, a big light that's shining in my eyes, and this audience of 300 or 400 people out there. And you've got about 15 to 18 minutes. They don't really want you to go past 18 minutes. So you're delivering a monologue. And so one, you can't wing it. I probably spent easily 6 months preparing. First putting kind of my monologue down on paper, which, just laying it out. And then I spent easily 3 to 4 months everywhere I went, I was rehearsing. So as I was driving the car, as I was walking on campus, I was talking to myself. I was rehearsing and just going through it and moving things around, and maybe this should go towards the back and this should go towards the front. And really right up until right before I did it, I was just rehearsing in my head, because you don't want to get up on stage and all of a sudden have nothing to say. I mean, you don't want to have a break in the action. So it's got to be rehearsed, but it has to come off as more, spontaneous and natural. It can't come off as scripted. And so, there's a lot of pressure in a good way. My heart beats a lot faster when I do a TEDx compared to if I was delivering a speech to 1,000 people at a conference. Again, I don't call it easier, but it's easier because, again, I have my slides. I can turn to the slides. TEDx, the other thing with TEDx is interesting, at least the one I did and Cape May, when I present to a group at a conference, I walk into the group, I can walk to the back of the room, I walk around, I want to engage everyone. TEDx, they have kind of lines taped on the floor. They don't want you out of that box because that's where the cameras are, that's where the lights are. So you really can't, the box I was in was, I think it was 6 feet by 6 feet, maybe. So you can't go out of that. And that for me is tricky because I would prefer walking the stage and walking. And so that's another piece of it, that you kind of have to stay in this boxed in area because that's how the cameras are shooting you. So anyone who's ever wanted to do a TEDx talk, I highly recommend it. You've got to obviously create a topic that is engaging, relevant, applicable, timely, all those things. I don't think it can be so general, but I don't know if it can be so niche either. And then plan to invest a lot of time. They invited me to be one of the featured speakers in February of 2024. The TEDx event was October 24. So in essence, once I accepted in February, I was kind of preparing from February through October and taking, just developing. And even right up until that morning, I wasn't 100% sure what my opening line was going to be. And that was really important to me. I wanted to start with something that was going to hook the audience, engage the audience right away, and get them in. Because if you don't, you may lose them. And so even right up until I went on stage, I was kind of still tweaking and revising what's going to be the opening line. And then on the back end, I ended up, I'll summarize it real quickly, but on the back end, I actually came up with that on the spur of the moment. I didn't have a closing. I had a closing, but it was, and on the back end, I said something like, does everyone hear that out there? I hear it. I don't know if anyone else hears it. That's the Gen Z train. It's blowing its horn and it's taking off from the station. And you're either on that train or you're waving goodbye to it. My recommendation is get on that train. I just came up with that actually. I kind of came up with that as I was delivering the speech. I'm like, all right, at some point I've got to end this. So how are we going to end it? And that's how I ended it. So.
That's perfect. Yeah. Like I didn't know this is how TEDx work. I thought people just get invited and they have to speak on something.
It's a combination. So TEDx is really fascinating. There are, in essence, TEDx franchises all over the world. You could have a TEDx Newark. You could have a TEDx Rutgers. The one I was at was TEDx Cape May. So there are all these TEDx organizations, and typically they'll do one event a year. Some will actually have tryouts. So for TEDx Asbury Park back in 2018 or 2019, I actually tried out. So I was part of the tryout, of which there was, I think, 10 people tried out. Where this TEDx came made, they actually just called and said, would you be one of our featured speakers? So I didn't have to try out. So it's a combination. But typically what you do is you actually apply and you submit a lot of information. You submit videos of either doing podcast interviews or delivering speeches, and then the organizers of that particular TEDx, they make a decision whether you make sense or don't make sense. And there's always a theme too. That's the other thing. Each TEDx each year has a theme, and so anyone who delivers a TEDx talk, it's got to ladder up to whatever that theme is for that particular event. And so that's an important element too, is they want everything kind of ladder up to the theme. So fascinating, love it, and again, anyone who's ever interested, go for it.
Oh, okay, perfect. I really want to know about who is Mark Beal beyond being a professor? We know you talk about Gen Z and all that stuff, but I don't think a lot of people know about your the work which you used to do before being a professor.
Sure.
And I really want to talk about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I think I read somewhere, I may be wrong, you worked in FIFA, Olympics, something like that.
So I can dive right into it. So before becoming a professor, I spent 30 years in public relations and marketing with a focus on kind of sports and entertainment.
Yep.
So I started working at the Olympic Games in 1992 in Albertville in Barcelona. But whether it was the Olympic Games, FIFA World Cup, Super Bowl halftime show, the World Series, the Rolling Stones, it was on behalf of a sponsor. So it was on behalf of a brand or a corporation who was investing millions of dollars in sponsoring the Olympic Games and sponsoring the Super Bowl halftime show and sponsoring the Rolling Stones tour back in 2005, 2006. So once they invested that, now they have to bring that to life. They have to activate it. And so they would turn to an agency like ours and say, okay, we've got this great asset, this sponsorship. What do we do with it? How do we bring it to life? How do we engage consumers? How do we engage our target consumer? And so in today's world, you're creating an integrated marketing campaign around that. And as we talk in my classes all the time, that involves, paid media, whether that's advertising or sponsored media, good old-fashioned earned media, getting media to cover, shared media, working with influencers, social media influencers, which really didn't exist 20 years ago. And then what are we doing on what we call our owned media channels? So the brand that's sponsoring, what are they doing on their Instagram channel, their LinkedIn platform, if they have TikTok, Facebook? All of that comes together to, again, activate and amplify the sponsorship. So a lot of the work was around sponsorships and working with brands, Coca-Cola, Capital One, Taco Bell. But it was also working with those brands on just new initiatives, a new product. We launched Doritos Locos Taco for Taco Bell. Launching a new piece of technology for a company. So it wasn't always around sponsorship, but typically that's how we got our foot in the door with companies because we had an expertise in that. And then if we proved ourselves and delivered great value, they'd say, hey, we have another project here, has nothing to do with sponsorship. Do you think you can help us with this new initiative, whatever it might be?
Got it. So how do you bring up a new product in the market? This is more of a business question which I have because I myself is working on few things and I have seen business evolved over the time. There are, on the one side, there are conventional way of businesses like people used to do, coming up with multiple SKUs, right? Nowadays, the brands are coming up with single SKU and then they build their brand upon that and they eventually, if they feel like they'll just add up some SKUs or not. So building a business has been changed in last 20 years. I want to talk to you about that. How do you feel that it has changed and what someone can do right now to build a brand?
It's changed significantly, right? Everything has changed. Going to market with a new product, with a business, marketing that new business or that new product. It's all changed significantly over the last decade or so, right? And will continue to change. I guess on one side of the fence, from purely a marketing standpoint, right? We no longer have to really invest in things like mass advertising, right? So 20 plus years ago, you had to, if you had a product that was rolling out nationally, well, you had to go invest in, network advertising, cable advertising. Well, now you can do so much again across social media and content, and really customize it for your audiences that you may never have to invest in any what we'll call traditional advertising, right? So that's one. Two, we have, as I said earlier, not that we always didn't have influencers, but years ago influencers were journalists and producers, and right now influencers are what we call social media influencers. These are individuals who have a following. They may have tens of thousands of followers. They may have millions of followers, but they have followings, and it's usually in a certain niche or an area, right? So you're a beauty influencer, you're a fitness influencer, you're a gadgets influencer. And if that's the case, and your company's launching something, well, one of the first things I would do is, well, who are those influencers out there who we need to create relationships with, who we need to get our product in their hands, because they may have the greatest influence. Again, but it's got to be a fit, right? I'll make it, if it's, we'll just call it some sort of tech gadget, I don't know, maybe it's a new fitness gadget or something. Well, I'm probably not going to go to, I may not go to a travel influencer or a beauty influencer, but I'm going to go to someone who, whether on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or some other channel, this is what they do, this is what they feature, they try, they test, they review, and all that. And so that's just one element that you couldn't do that 20 years ago. It didn't exist 20 years ago, right? And then another element which we see a lot more of today is, DTC. So do we really need to get our product in Costco or supermarkets, or can we just go direct to consumer? It's interesting. I won't name names, but I'm seeing traditional brands that have been out in the marketplace, the traditional, we'll just call it distribution channels, are now actually saying, well, maybe we should look at DTC. Maybe we should actually just sell directly to our consumer and bypass the middle person, right, the retailer. And so DTC is something that, that's been around for a while, but I think more and more consumers are buying direct from that company, that brand, whatever it might be. So it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating right now.
And I think logistics played a big role in that, because earlier the logistics were not very good enough. I think Amazon and these people revolutionized the logistics part.
Correct.
And that's why it's changing. And I personally think that compared to earlier times, it's easier to build a bootstrap business with low investment nowadays and take it to the million. Earlier it was you need $1 million or $100,000, $200,000 to invest in a business. That's one of the best things which I realized. What do you think about that?
I would agree. I completely. I mean, we'll just take Amazon as an example, right? They revolutionized e-commerce, how consumers purchase habits now, right? Prior to Amazon, right, you went to this thing called a supermarket or a grocery store or a pharmacy, or I don't even think big box was really around at that point. Maybe it was on the front end. So they changed consumer behavior. The pandemic definitely changed consumer behavior, right? There are many things came through that pandemic that that just changed the way we buy products, review, all those kinds of things. And so I completely agree with you nowadays. You could potentially launch a product in 2025 or beyond that is with a completely new playbook. Ultimately you still have to produce something that's going to be, again, relevant, and have an audience that's going to have a need or a want for this product, whatever it might be. But I think easier is probably not the right word, but I think it's easier to market it, promote it, socialize it, get it out there in today's world than it was, let's just say, in 2005.
Yeah, that's true. I might sound ignorant in this part, but I really don't know what exactly PR means and why. I'll tell you the reason.
Fine.
I know what marketing is. I might know the activities which is done under the umbrella of PR, but I don't know if they are called PR, right? The only PR word which I've heard in my life was, when the influencers do something bad, and then they are termed to be the PR agencies is going to help them to get their image clean. So this is where I heard PR. So
that's fine. Absolutely. As my current and former students know, on the first day of class, I usually on the board in the front of the room, I'll say public relations is marketing. So I'm a big believer that everything is actually marketing. A billboard on the New Jersey Turnpike is marketing. It may be advertising, but it's marketing. A post from a social media influencer about a product or promoting a product, that's marketing. It may be content marketing or influencer marketing, but it's marketing. So I do always say public relations is marketing, because everything from the moment we wake up till we go to bed, every message we receive, whether it's a traditional TV ad or something we read on our favorite blog or a podcast we're listening to where the guest is promoting something, well, it's marketing, right? So public relations has evolved significantly. Right around 1900 is when public relations kind of became a profession in this country, where you could actually go earn a living through public relations. But from 1900 to 2005, it was very one-dimensional. And I started in my PR career, mid to late 80s. We kind of did one thing and one thing only. We proactively pitched or conducted outreach to media influencers. So in the old days, prior to social media, the influencers were journalists, editors, producers, radio hosts, and you're trying to get your client on television, on radio, written up in newspapers, all that. Well, that was PR at its finest, what we call earned media, right? So we're trying to get editorial media. We're not paying for articles. We're not paying for our client to appear on Good Morning America. We're trying to get them on there because they've got something compelling, newsworthy, relevant to share. And that media outlet who's agreed to have them on thinks it's also compelling and relevant to share. So in its truest sense, for 100 plus years, that's what public relations was at its most basic. This idea of generating editorial media to promote a product, an individual, a new album, a new movie, whatever it might be. And then social media, 2005, 2006, 2007 starts to enter the equation. And now all of a sudden, public relations transforms significantly. And so again, if we fast forward to today, and I always use this example. So if I worked at a public relations agency with 100 individuals, say in 2000, 95 would basically be doing the same thing every day. They would be pitching media, reaching out to media. Again, in 2000 would have been newspapers, radio, television, and magazine, to try to get them to cover the client, cover whatever it was they're doing. If I was at an agency of 100 individuals today, a PR agency, maybe 5, 10, 15 would be doing that, not 95, because the rest of the team would be content creators, individuals who are developing social media posts, individuals who are creating partnerships with social media influencers and working with them, others who might be working in what we call the paid media area, so maybe creating sponsored content. So it's evolved so much that in today's world, I'm not the only one who says this, but really public relations today is what we call integrated marketing communication. It's not just this one dimension of let's pitch media, see if they'll cover our client. It's all these things working together. So again, the common term that we talk about in my classes and in the industry is PASO. It's paid media, earned media, shared media, owned media, and it's all these channels working in an integrated fashion. To again amplify whatever it is we are, new product, sponsorship, partnership, new movie, new album for an artist, whatever it might be. We're kind of using that formula now, where from 1900 to 2005, 2010, it was only one channel, earned. And it was just focused on generating editorial coverage. So one interesting about PR today, and I mean, this is a good example having the podcast. People will say, well, there's no more newspapers anymore, and people don't watch TV. True, but newspapers like the Newark Star Ledger, right? It's now online. So there may not be a physical newspaper, but there's still a channel, and there's lots of content on that channel. But now we have things like podcasts, which they didn't really exist, I'll say 20 years ago. You've got, as we talked about it earlier, influencers on social media channels who have huge, significant followings. So I say all the time, the channels will always evolve. So if we go back to the early 1900s, we had newspapers, we had magazines, eventually we had radio, eventually we had TV. Well, now we still have some of that, but now we've got podcasts and bloggers and influencers and all that. But it's still about storytelling, engaging storytelling, right? It's still, that's the one common thread from 1900 to 2025 and beyond. You're still trying to engage an audience through some sort of storytelling. And again, whether that's storytelling about a new gadget, a new piece of technology, a new product, your sponsorship of the 2026 FIFA World Cup that's coming here, whatever it might be, it's still about storytelling. You're just telling it now through different channels than you were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Yeah.
I have a question in storytelling, but I'll come on that later. First thing, I was just listening to you and I just realized something. Do you think that PR has changed in a way that, I get it, PR is basically like marketing is communicating with the audience, right, as a product. This is marketing, and it's public relation, like what kind of relation I'm making with the public.
Correct.
So this is PR. So I have one quick question to you. Do you think that PR has evolved over the time? Because now, earlier people used to I don't want to use this word, lie to customers in some sense, not be authentic to them. But now, customers appreciate those brands more who are being authentic.
Yes. Yeah.
who are highlighting the weaknesses in a form of strengths.
Correct.
And that builds a lot of trust. This is what I believe.
No, I like that. I like that approach. So one of the things that we have now in 2025 that we didn't have in, say, 2000, which is not that long ago, to your point, you name the brand, you name the corporation, just again, from Elf Cosmetics to Coca-Cola to Red Bull to McDonald's. They have their what we call owned media channels now. They didn't have those in 1999, right? Maybe they had a website, maybe. But now they might actually have their own podcasts. They probably have a presence on TikTok. They probably have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, maybe Snapchat, LinkedIn, a website. Who knows what else they have, a YouTube channel. They didn't have those channels 20 plus years ago. So now they can communicate directly, to your point, with their key audiences, their key stakeholders. And if they do that in a real genuine and authentic way, they should be building relationships with those folks. So I sometimes draw a triangle on the board. So if we talked about marketing, right? So if we're talking about, it doesn't matter what the brand is or company or even a new company. So I'll draw a triangle and I'll say at the base of the triangle, the biggest base of the triangle is like, we'll just call it general consumers. So these people aren't buying our product yet. We want them to buy our product, but it's a huge audience, right? Let's go after them. Obviously, there's certain folks within that base you're really trying to get to. But once they convert and they buy, okay, now they're a customer. So that's a little bit up the triangle, a little above period. It's a little bit smaller. Now they're customers. Okay, well, that's great. They're customers. Well, now they're the customers. Let's really nurture the relationship. Let's build a relationship. And then let's turn them into like advocates. And ultimately at the top, I call it lovers of the brand. So an advocate doesn't just buy your product. They actually then tell their friends they bought your product and they like this product, right? Which is great. A lover of the brand might even go even further than that. And a lover of the brand, unlike a social media influencer who's getting paid, they're not even looking to get paid. They just want to share their love for this brand with all their friends, with their family, and all those kinds of things. So I look at kind of that pyramid that way: consumers, customers, advocates, lovers. And one of the first things I ask any company if I'm in a new meeting with them, especially when I was in my agency days, first thing I'd say is, have you identified the lovers of your brand? And they kind of look at me kind of funny, right? I said, have you identified the top 50, top 100 lovers of your brand? Do you know who they are? And they'll be like, oh, we sort of do, but we don't. Well, in today's world, you can. We could do it right now. We all we have to do is go on TikTok and Instagram and search a brand, and within moments, we can identify, wow, look at this, Jane Doe. She really loves like Rook Coffee out of Monmouth County, New Jersey. Every day she's posting about Rook Coffee. Once we identify him or her, we should now bring them into the fold, invite them in as a lover. Hey, we really love the love you're sharing. Let's get a meeting. Let's do some fun stuff together. Let us get you our latest new product before it even goes out, and we want to give it to you to taste test. Or let's bring you down to our plant or our factory or whatever. Or I want to get your ideas. What do you think we should launch in 2026? What kind of product? Like, that's what I would do with lovers of brands, is bring them into the fold. And that connection is only getting deeper. And to your point, it goes back to two words you said earlier. It's genuine and it's authentic. They're not getting paid. They're doing it because they love this product or they love this brand. Well, let's reward them by bringing them into the fold. Let's give them access and experiences to things. Let's have them even, again, propose ideas about the future of our brand, the future of our products. Boy, if you create relationships with that, like that with thousands, millions, that's powerful marketing.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing, this is one of the best things which is happening right now. A lot of brands are doing that. I wouldn't say like the bigger brands are doing that, because I think they're secure enough not to come up with like these techniques, because they know that they already exist in the market. But the new brands which are upcoming right now, they're doing these things. And the best part they do is, like, I've seen this, like, if some brand of a soft drink comes in, they will tell that why we are different, and they'll tell that in a sense of product awareness, that we are coming up with a face wash is like cruelty free, and these kind of things, like now the SOP has become these kind of things. And again, this is some sort of a public relation. You are tapping onto those feelings of those people, which is making them closer to you.
Just a quick example, because it happened just this past weekend, but Fanatics, which in essence, Fanatics, very well known for sports apparel, right? You want to get your favorite team's jersey, sweatshirt, hat, whatever it might be, you go to Fanatics, you go online, right? So a DTC brand, they have physical locations as well, but let's go but they just had for the second year in a row their Fanatics Fest in New York at the Javits Center, where we'll just say tens of thousands of fans went. Well, so they created an experience. They gave access to their fans to that experience, to the brand, to athletes and artists and others. And that's just a good example of a brand that, is a brand that typically is doing all their business, so to speak, online, direct to their consumer. And now they're bringing it to life in this 3-day Fanatics Fest. I think they ended up with over 100,000 attendees.
I got a Gary Vee card from
Amazing.
that event. So my roommate, there was a friend who came from Pennsylvania. He studies in Penn State, and he was here for the Fanatics Fest. And he's an influencer. He's like over 60,000 followers. And he went there and he got a creator's pass. That's like worth $5,000-$6,000. And he went in. He met Gary Vee, and he got me like limited edition cards from Gary Vee.
Yeah.
I think it's worth around like $150 or $200.
That's great.
So I got those cards, and he met a lot of influencers there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to Fanatics next year, definitely. So,
but that's an example of, again, I say marketing in 2025 beyond. I call it access and experiences. So give your fans, on Fanatics Fest, truly Fanatics Fest, right? They're fans. Give your fans access to experiences that they can't get through just going through your e-commerce site.
Yep.
And now they've done it 2 years in a row, and it's going to be even bigger next year. But what's interesting about that is any brand could do that. They may not have to rent out the Javits Center to do it. You can do it in your own way, but any brand could give access to their fans to, again, experience the brand in a different way than just simply going online, buying my NFL jersey before the season. It goes well beyond that.
Right. I think that's true. And also, I personally think that the consumer market has changed a lot since beginning, and I think COVID did that a lot.
Yes.
And this is like something which is about Gen Zs. But yeah, we'll come to that.
Okay.
Like I have one thing to add in that. But I really want to talk about your first books, which you came up with. Like it's 101 lessons.
Oh yeah. So the idea, I mean, I've always wanted to author a book. It was always something I always enjoyed writing. When I was in college, I was actually a journalism major at Rutgers. And so I always wrote for my first job ever. I'll call it first real job. When I was a sophomore in high school and I grew up down the Jersey Shore, there was an ad for a weekly newspaper for a sports editor. And my mom said, "Hey, you should apply to that." I said, "They're not going to hire some sophomore in high school." Well, I guess no one else applied because they hired me. And so I became the sports editor of this weekly newspaper. I think it was weekly, might have been monthly, but either way. And so not only did I get to write, I got to basically cover whatever I wanted to cover, but I also I learned a lot about layout and design. So it was fascinating. So as a sophomore, 14 years old, let's say, that was great. So I always had that love for writing. That turned a year or two later into actually writing for a daily newspaper, the Asbury Park Press. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was just stringing for them. I was going out and covering things. So, always wanted to write and had a few ideas. I had one book, I can't remember the year, sometime in the 2000s, we'll say, that I started that's still sitting somewhere that I never got too far. But the title was Success is a Marathon, which is obviously a common phrase. And it was going to be chapters on very successful people on basically sharing their marathon to success. How did they get where they were? Lessons learned, insights. I still think it's a great book. We'll write it someday. But as I started teaching at Rutgers as just a adjunct, I started in 2013 with one course, one turned to two turned to three, and eventually by 2019 they asked if I'd go full time. Right in that 2015, 16, 17 period, after every single class in person, because all the classes were in person, I would have students just say, how do I write my resume? How do I write a cover letter? Do I write a thank you note after my interview? How do I conduct in those days, a phone interview versus an in-person interview? So all these questions, which I'm sure, obviously somewhere on campus they could get the answers, but I was just getting them every day after class and by email and all those kinds of things. And so I thought, here's a great idea for a book. Let's answer each of those questions with a lesson. Yeah. And originally it started out as 100 lessons. And then I ended up with 101. I'm like, well, 101's even better because when you talk about, courses in college,
101. Yeah.
101.
Yeah.
And so each is just a one-page concise lesson about cover letter, resume, phone interview, thank you note, networking. And so 1 to 2 pages each, and was really excited about that book. That was, of course, pre-pandemic because that came out by 2017 or so. Yeah. And give that book out to all my students. Now, because of the pandemic and how the workplace has transformed and changed so much, started writing a book during the pandemic. but it took about 4 years to complete. So in 2024, came out with, in essence, the next version of the 101 lessons they never taught you in college, called Win the Job and Thrive in a Multi-Generational Workplace. So that came out in 2024. Okay. Some of the lessons from the 101 Lessons book are actually still in there because they're still relevant. They're still relevant, but there's so much new post-pandemic that I recruited my co-author, Frank Kovacs, and one of my former students who's now an executive recruiter with a very large company, and we created 166 lessons. And they're all still the same kind of format, a page or two each, but there's so much more now about Zoom interviews and applicant tracking systems and things that maybe didn't exist or weren't prevalent back in 2017. So
you might have talked about a lot of communication. How do you talk to people, right? That's, I think, the essence of it, networking, the way we say it. I have this question, like, I'm not going to ask you, like, how do you network with someone? Not like that, but I face this issue sometimes that, let's say you are in a networking event, and that's why I very much dislike sometimes these career fairs and job fairs kind of thing. I don't like it because it's very difficult for you to make a mark on it because first of all, you're not very skilled enough to make a mark in front of that person. Like, he won't remember you. You do anything, he won't remember you. There should be some other ways to do that. But like, first tell me about this. What do you think? Like, I think you're agreeing with my point.
Okay. Well, first thing I say is I don't like job fairs either. I don't like career fairs.
We're on the same page.
There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you've got all these people going to the same place where there's, a certain number of employers there, and whether it's 50 or 100, doesn't matter. And so we're all kind of standing in this line, and we have, you've got your heart beating, you're nervous, the room is probably very hot, and you've got 5 seconds to make a strong impression. Yeah. It's just not the right way to do it. It's like, I don't call it speed dating, but it's very speed dating, right? So I'm not a big fan of those. However, I just had this conversation a week ago with my student who was going to one. I said, well, here's how I would approach it. If you can get access to the list of the employers who are going to be there, maybe you can get access. If you can get access to specific names of people from those employers who are going to be there, I would send a LinkedIn, first review the list. Are there 5 or 10 companies that are like, those are 5, and connect with them on LinkedIn. Say, I see you're going to be at the job fair in a week. I'm going to be there. Just want to introduce myself. Now you've at least started a little bit of a relationship. You're probably going to be one of the few people that actually does that. So by the time you get there, they'll at least remember, oh, this is John Doe. He connected with me on LinkedIn a week ago. Second thing I told the student last week is I said, don't treat it as a sprint. If you're going to go, again, if you're going to go.
Yeah.
First, just do a lap around the building first. Like literally, just walk around. Don't like jump to the first employer and just observe. You don't have to race out of there. So just observe, walk around, cool down a little bit, exhale. You probably just came in from 90 degrees, so you're already sweating, and get kind of a sense of the layout. And if you've got certain companies you want to meet with, wait till maybe there's not a line of 5 people. And kind of sneak in there when there's nobody there and you have a chance to. So anyway, that's kind of my approach to effectively working a job fair, a career fair. Yeah. But to your point, I would go a completely different route. I in all the books we bring this up, right? Identify your 20 to 25 target companies. Who are 20 or 25 companies you really want to go work for? This is different than just seeing, ads posted and responding. That's called reactive. Proactive is 20, 25 companies. So you've done your research, you've heard about them, you've read about them, you like, what they're doing, all those kinds of things. Next thing you do after that is, maybe through your team. Your team could be a professor, it could be a classmate, could be a family relative. Who knows someone at these companies? So I ask my students all the time, or I'll say, hey, if you've got these 20, 25 companies, share the list with me. I might know 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I might. And if I do, I will make the introduction for you to someone at that company. Well, if we do that approach and we can make that introduction, we call that the speed of trust. And what I mean by that is if I'm going to make an introduction on behalf of anyone, one of my former students, to my good contact at this company, well, there's a really good chance my contact is going to say, what, I trust Mark. Yep. I'm going to set up a Zoom call or a meeting with this individual. Well, now you've already made more progress than a 5-second meeting. And so the idea eventually is create that connection, leveraging your network. Once you have that connection, nurture the relationship. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn because I think on LinkedIn, in today's world, which wasn't the case 15 years ago, you can nurture relationships. So someone posts something, hey, congratulations, or really love your thought leadership, right? You don't always have to just be emailing them all the time and saying, do you have a job for me? So you can nurture the relationship. And then when you do see a job posting at that company, now you've built a relationship. Hey, John, I see this post. I'm going to apply for this job. By chance, would you happen to know the recruiter or someone in HR? At that point, hopefully you've built a relationship. They're like, give me your latest resume. I will walk it down the hall, or I will get it to the right person. So that's the approach. And again, it's not a sprint. It's more of a marathon approach. But I've seen it work consistently over and over and over and over. There's a great University of Michigan data point a couple years ago. But basically, they say that, let's just say 100 people apply for a job, which in today's world is probably more like 1,000. They say 7%, I think it's less, but 7% or less come through a personal referral. So 93+% are the good old apply, submit, right? I don't think it's even 7%. I think it's less, but either way. But those referrals comprise 40% of the hires. So if you can get a referral, meaning someone called on your behalf, someone reached out on your behalf, there's a really good chance you're going to make the pool of 10 or 12 candidates they're going to interview. And then you've got a really great shot, because now you're not competing against 1,000 people, you're competing against maybe 10. So that's the whole approach to that, is who knows someone at that company that make an introduction for me that I can then leverage and then nurture the relationship. So when a job is posted, I've got someone on the inside who will vouch for me and recommend me.
Yeah, maybe I came across your book earlier because I did the same thing. So this happened with me. I graduated in December, and I was the first person in my whole batch without zero experience, who got 4 offers. And that was the whole approach I got. And the 4 offers I got, only one of them was from a direct apply. All 3 of them are reaching out to people and building this kind of relationship. Because when I was sitting in the interview, my interview was with a partner at EY, and he knew me. He was like, oh, you got through the first round. I was like, yeah. And I don't think he knew that he's going to take me in.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like he was even interviewing me. So I think this is really important. I realized the networking and the relationship building is changed a lot, because even though people are cold messaging a lot on LinkedIn, it's not working. You don't do that. But I have this thing to ask you that, firstly, I agree with the point, the literal advice you give to check the layout of the building. And I think there's something which I read. It's a psychological thing which happens to you. Whenever you enter a new room, as a survival instinct, as an evolutionary thing, you always are feared of that room because you're not familiar with the environment. Yeah. And so this happens to when you go to college for the first time. On the second or third day, fourth day, you are comfortable. You're very comfortable in that class. You even though you don't know the people there, but you are comfortable in your own, because this is my den.
Correct. So well, that's the case. You raise a good point. So that's even the case when you go, let's say in today's world, job interviews have changed, right? Nowadays, there may be a phone screening followed by a Zoom interview, followed by a Zoom interview. You may never even go into the physical location, but if you do, to your point, I always tell my students, if the final interview is at, we'll just say at an office building in New York, and it's at 10 a.m., well, actually get there at 9 a.m. Just get in the building, go into the lobby, exhale, relax a little bit. You've never been in this building. You've never been here, right? Your heart's going to be beating a little bit stronger than it normally does. And so I think that's really important as you go into new territory, a new building, a new place. It's new for you. And so I always say get there really early, not necessarily to the interview early, but just get to the building early, scout it out, check it out. Just get used to that building. Because to your point, the more you're there, the more familiar. Right. If you had an interview at a company, let's say here in New Jersey, I'd probably on Saturday, Sunday drive to that building. Just drive to it. Know how to get there. Yeah. Know where the parking is. Know where the visitor parking is. Just all those little things that can create anxiety on the day of the interview. Wipe them out of the way. So the day you go, I've already been here. I know this building. I go in that door. Little stuff.
And that shifts the gear completely in a positive way. I have seen that in myself. So when I came to this college on the day 1 orientation, no one knew anyone. People were not familiar with each other. So people sitting with themselves, not talking to a lot of people. Surprisingly, I knew. So when you come for the first time, there is a group building automatically which happens. There will be tables and people are sitting and they just become familiar to each other and they become a group for a short period of time. So I came there, but I knew one person in that group, one person in that group, one person in that group. Somehow, before coming here. And because I knew them, I just introduced myself. Hey, hi, how are you? We met at that time. I became the center of that network. Now people want to meet me so that they can meet them.
That's right.
So this is something which happens if you make yourself familiar with people. And that's why I really want to know one thing. People are very feared when they approach people. And one thing which I realized just now, like we have been into a conversation for like more than half an hour, the way you tell stories, it's like really good. It's really nice. It's commendable. Like, how do you do that?
The
like,
way I tell stories.
Yeah. Your storytelling skills are like.
Hey,
really
I
good.
said earlier, it's all about storytelling.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a big believer in, we talk a lot about AI, and we can get into a whole interview about AI, but I'm a huge believer in HI, human interaction. So while AI, and I do believe I always say we're in chapter 1 on the book of like just AI and marketing, but it's going to move real fast. We're only in chapter 1. But HI is not going away. So human interaction, what you just talked about, walking into a room where there's a lot of people and connecting with people, interacting with, that's not going to go away. For the most part, even a job interview, maybe there's, an interview, the first interview might be some sort of automated robot type interview where you're not dealing with anyone who's human. But eventually you're going to have human conversation. It may be a phone call, it may be a Zoom, it may be Teams, it may be in person. But I do always say, to me, I believe the person that ultimately wins the job, so if there was down to 10 finalists, I think it's the one who's kind of a master in HI, who knows how to have a conversation, who can engage others. Because I think when they get done, they don't say, hey, I really liked this person's experience. I think they say, I really enjoyed the conversation I had with that individual. I think they'd be a good fit here. Obviously they're considering a lot of factors. I get all that. So HI, no matter how advanced we get technology-wise, HI is not going away. We still do business through HI. We still connect. We still meet. We still, if you have a client, you and that client, you may be texting each other, you may be Slack, whatever, but you still have a relationship and connect. So,
and I think it might sound trivial, but it's really important to ask, how's the weather?
All those things.
Yeah, all those things. And I completely, how can someone develop those skills if someone comes from introverted? And I think I know that you are from Rutgers, New Brunswick, and you might have seen a lot of Indians. And this is a common problem among Indians, being introverted, not very confident. How someone can develop that?
That's a tremendous question you just asked, because just about everything else out there that's a skill. I talk to my students a lot about feature your hard skills on your resume. So if you know an AI platform like ChatGPT and you use it, well, I put that on your resume, because employers want to, do you have any experience with AI? Have you used AI platform? All that. If you're going into work in social media or content, that's where you want to go. Well, you better make sure on your skills it shows TikTok, it shows Instagram. You know those platforms, right? But those are all hard skills. Yep. Nowadays, you can go get certification for a lot of different things, right? SEO and other things, right? All that. But HI is not something they offer certifications in. They don't really offer classes in it. So you raise a really good point about, if someone is just shy, or someone is an introvert, or someone just prefers to communicate through that mobile device, they actually have to work. They have to actually just work more at it. They have to have more conversation. So I think it was just yesterday I had a meeting with someone, and I said, the more just interview experience you get, and it doesn't mean formal job interviews, what I call cup of coffee interviews, informational interviews, discussions like this, you just become much more comfortable. But you got to first get out there and do that, because you can't just flick a light on and say, today I'm going to have, it doesn't go from not doing it to doing it. So just the more chances you get to converse, to have conversations, to meet people. And I always say cup of coffee. The reason why is that most people are interested in having a cup of coffee meeting. Meaning we're just going to chat. Yeah. But that chat could lead to a lot of places. Yeah. It could lead to a job even. Yep. So again, I guess if you're an introvert, if you're not really get hyped up by conversation, proactively go out there and converse, because you're going to need to, especially if you're at the point. So let's say you're I'm making it up, a sophomore, junior in college. Well, by the time you're a senior and you've graduated, you're going to need to be able to converse. You're going to need to, because in order to secure that job, you're going to have conversation with someone. Yep. And then to thrive in that job, you're really going to need to converse with your coworkers, your colleagues, your mentors, your managers, all those things. Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
And I call it like doing reps in a gym. Like,
it's exactly right.
The more you do, the more you better you become. Yeah. And one thing which I think you mentioned about that, and I also read it somewhere. When you have these kind of coffee chats and these kind of things, when you talk to people, you do one thing which is called seeding. So I call it seeding, like, because
yes,
I think
that's correct.
you said something about the networking part.
Yeah.
And that was like exactly the point of seeding, which I wanted to refer at that time.
So, in sales, you've heard this term historically. Well, I gotta be careful what I say, but are you a hunter or a farmer? So in sales, right? Are you a hunter or a farmer? So the hunter immediately goes and's got to make the sale and gets it done, right? All that kind of thing. Well, I'm a farmer. I was in sales for years. I plant seeds. I nurture those seeds. I grow those seeds because I'm looking at the long run, not the short gain. It's not about making a sale today. It's about this long-term relationship. And so you'll hear a lot about the hunter versus the farmer. I know a lot of hunters, and they're proud to be hunters. I am a farmer. It's about planting those seeds that you said. It's about nurturing relationships, and it's about building long-term relationships that last 10, 20, 30 years. The hunter may get the sale today, and they may lose the business in a week or two or three or a month or whatever. True. Well, there's nothing, it's all about the long term. So
So can you give me one quick example of seeding?
I mean, it's kind of what I do every day. It's just making connections with individuals. I'm not going to give you a specific example. It's making connections with individuals in a mutually beneficial way. So how can I help you? I just had this right before we sat down. I just had a meeting about this 2 hours ago with someone, and basically the question I asked was, how can I help you? This is someone who's a business owner. They have a business and they're trying to break into certain companies. And so very simply, not what are you doing for me? How can I help you? Because ultimately, if I can help and we collaborate, well, eventually there'll be something that but I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for how can I help you? So I think it's just that. It's not what's in it for me. It's how can I help you, and then building that relationship and nurturing. But the seeding is it's always, putting water on that seed. It's always growing that. So it's like I said earlier, it's little things, but on LinkedIn, it's commenting on a post they might make. It's congratulating on something. It's checking in with them, seeing how are they doing, all those things. That's kind of nurturing a relationship. It doesn't always have to be, let's meet at 12 o'clock every Wednesday for a meeting. We don't need to do that. So.
Yeah, I think I do that a lot in the conversations when I do. I just want to have a quick example. I don't think it's a suitable example for the conversation right now, but in a dating scenario, when people talk to anyone and they approach someone, it's not, you treat that person as a person. You're not. It's not just an opposite gender. It's a person. You just treat them like that. You approach them, you talk to them, and something I call seed, which I do. In the conversation, if you want to ask someone out, in the conversation, you just mention, okay, you know what, have you been this? You are asking about that person, knowing them more. Okay, have you been to this coffee place or something? Oh, that's a really good coffee place. You're not asking out right now. You just you just seeded it. And then eventually when the conversation is coming to an end, because usually what happens, the conversation go like this and it comes like this. You don't want that conversation to be landed like this. You need to keep it on the same level. So this is what you do. You just plant a seed earlier, and then eventually, follow up on that. So the conversation is on the top.
If one of my students, let's say I help them secure we'll call it a cup of coffee informational interview with someone at a company that they want to work at. Well, the first thing I do is I say within 24 hours, not just a thank you email, but based on something you talked about, send them a link. Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation about, I'm making it up, AI and marketing. I just saw this article today in Forbes. That's going to resonate. Now you've really planted seeds. Wow, I didn't just get a thanks you for your time. I got thank you. And oh, by the way, thought you might find this interesting. Now you've just taken the relationship even further because you actually listened to what you were talking about, and then you shared with them. You followed up with something else. So to your point, it's all part of that just nurturing relationships.
Okay. Yeah, I think we discussed a lot about communication. I really want to get into the CEO. Okay. So I really want to know, how did you decide to write a book and talk about Gen Zs?
Yeah. So again, for 20 years, I led the new business process at my agency. So, early 2000s, 2005, 2010, 2015. Every time you got a brief or a what we call an RFP, a request for proposal from a company, it was always about millennials. So again, 2000, 2005, 2010, right? It was all about these millennials, right? How do we engage them? How do we convert them into customers? So we would do an extensive amount of research on millennials. Their purchasing habits, their media consumption habits. What do they watch? What do they listen to? What do they do? What do they do for fun? We would literally look at millennials 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
How many, right? So as I started teaching at Rutgers in 2015, 16, 17, 18, I just had kind of a light bulb moment as I left campus one day. I said, millennials are still the focus. But come 2022, 23, 24, 25, Gen Z will become the priority. At the time they weren't. 2017 they weren't. In fact, there's some companies now that are only starting to think about Gen Z, which is, I find interesting. They should have been thinking about them 5 years ago. And so it was really just, okay, let me just start thinking more about Gen Zers. Let me read every survey. Let me read every study. Let me just take it all in. And then in the classroom, let's get their take on this campaign, that campaign, this new product, this new initiative. And so it was just a combination of those two things, really, that started in 2017 and just resulted in a lot of just like insights around this generation. So, today, so now we're in 2025, so 8 years later. So 2025 today, the oldest Gen Zers, believe it or not, turned 28 this year. If we go with 1997 as the first birth year. So they're already 4, 5, 6 years into their careers. The youngest this year turned 13 if we go with 2012. So 13 to 28. So you still have Gen Zers who are in 8th grade, high school, college, if they choose college, and now in careers. Where 8 years ago when I started this, the oldest Gen Zers would have only been 20. So they would have been, if they went to college, juniors in college or seniors, and you would have had Gen Zers way back then that were in grammar school and elementary school. So, Gen Z is no longer just in school. One of my other books that I wrote is titled Gen Z Graduates to Adulthood, which I just love that because they are in the adulthood, each year more and more Gen Zers. So, first lease, first apartment. I've got Gen Zers now who are now more in the 26, 27, first home, first mortgage, insurance, first car, all those things. So as they're doing that, they're making decisions about what companies and brands they're becoming customers of, whether that's a credit card company, insurance company, automotive company, whatever it might be, consumer packaged goods. And so it was really just having done it for so many years around millennials, it was just a shift to, all right, well, millennials are still the focus in 17, 18, 19. Gen Z will become the focus. So let's just start learning as much as we can about these Gen Zers. But I do have that one little element that, again, an agency doesn't have is I'm with Gen Zers in the classroom every day. So as my students know, my former students know this well, we start typically every class with 20 minutes of what we call real-time, real-world marketing. So, and it may go longer, but we'll spend 20 minutes on just what's happened in the past week in marketing. What campaign did Coca-Cola launch?
Interesting.
Yeah, and what happens with those is some of them will just maybe not get any reaction, or maybe like, yeah, that campaign's not doing anything for us, or this was, this campaign by this group, smartest thing it could have done. We're all into it. We're all following it. We're all engaged by it, right? And so right in the classroom right there, I'm already getting reaction to real-time campaigns as they're happening. And okay, so if it is engaging you, why is it engaging you? Why is it working so well? What did they do that maybe this brand didn't do? And so I still do that every single class. And it's just fascinating to me what the students will come back as Gen Z students and just say, this campaign or this product or this initiative or this, whatever it is, or their partnership with this influencers, we're all tuned into it. Real quick example, because I don't really want to name brands, but a couple of years ago, Pepsi came out with a new drink called Starry. And when they came out with it, they said, this is the new Gen Z soda. And of course, my students at the time are like, well, they didn't ask us. They didn't ask us about a Gen Z soda, right? Like, so the reaction was, don't tell us this is a Gen Z soda, right? You should have come to us. If you wanted a Gen Z soda, you should have come to us. We would have told you what, maybe what kind of soda or what kind of beverage or whatever. So the point was, they kind of created this Gen Z soda, and I don't know if they ever actually, maybe they talked to Gen Z, maybe they didn't, but they proclaimed this is the new soda for Gen Z. And Gen Z's reaction was, I have no interest in it. So I always, there's certain companies. Target is a really good example. In 2018, they were the first company to launch a nationwide Gen Z incubator. So they had the wherewithal back in 18 to invite Gen Zers across America to connect and collaborate year-round with them on products, the customer experience, community, purpose, content, marketing, advertising. And they've been doing it ever since. So every year, they literally have hundreds of Gen Zers, probably, 20, 21, 22 years old, who they're collaborating with in the boardroom around all aspects of Target. So that's 7 years of that. Well, companies for the most part, don't really do that. They may do a focus group and sit in a room like this for an hour or two, and that's the focus. Yeah. They're collaborating ongoing. So anyway, company like that, Converse launched the same thing. They created what's called the All-Stars program, same kind of program. The NHL, I give them the credit, National Hockey League, they're the only entity in sports that for now 6 years has a North American Gen Z incubator where they have Gen Zers at a younger age, they're actually age 14, 15, 16, 17, across Canada and the US who are informing the CMO of the National Hockey League and her team how to make the in-arena experience better, how to make the TV experience better, how to make your content on Instagram and TikTok better. And that's a ongoing, every year they bring in another 30 or so Gen Zers to inform. And so it goes back to the point, if you want to engage, it doesn't matter what the generation is, Gen Z or soon Gen Alpha, well, invite them into the fold, invite them into the boardroom, and actually connect and collaborate with them in a meaningful, authentic, genuine way, and great things will result. So, Gen Alpha now, basically age 0 to 12. So at 12 years old, what are we, 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade? Well, soon enough, Gen Alpha is going to be 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And so you're going to see a shift. There's a little bit of it now. There's an occasional study, an occasional survey, an occasional thought piece from some company on Gen Alpha. But I think as they get closer to that 18, 19, 20, you're going to see so we're going to shift now from Gen Z focus to Gen Alpha, just like we went from millennials to Gen Z.
I have a hypothesis on that. Like this can be a good idea for someone who wants to start a business. This is what I think. Like this Gen Z era of like from right now 12 to 18 and the Gen Alpha, upcoming Gen Alpha, they have this habit. Like I think this developed after pandemic, that when I was telling you about the single SKU brands, these are the people who are more focusing on the single product consumer brands. So this means like people will think, okay, how can these many consumer brands can exist in the market? But it can. If you just put out the right marketing, and influencers play a great role in that. Like Prime is a good example of that.
Yeah, good example.
It's like they just came up with one drink and now they are coming up with different flavors. Yeah. And I know a lot of consumer brands which have made multi-million dollars in sales, and they are just like one product.
Yeah.
And this is just because of Gen Z and like the end of Gen Alpha.
Yeah. So my 9-year-old Gen Alpha grandson is a huge fan of Prime. He does not watch traditional television. He doesn't consume traditional television, doesn't consume traditional advertising, but he's on Roblox, he's on Fortnite, he's on YouTube, right? And so Gen Alpha, even less so than Gen Z, is not consuming traditional media, but they're still consuming a lot of media. And so again, if you're going to engage them, you need to go to where they consume content on the channels they consume. We've seen more and more in the last year or two, I'll just use one example, a year ago exactly, the Olympic Games in Paris, NBC, the U.S. Olympic Committee, ultimately they're trying to drive eyeballs to NBC, right, to this thing we call a television, especially younger generations. So what did they do? Well, they partnered with Roblox and created a whole Olympic experience on Roblox, because that at least is an entry point to engage Gen Z and Gen Alpha, because they're already on Roblox. I'm not saying every Gen Z and Gen Alpha, but they're on Roblox. So if they start to experience the Olympics or introduce the Olympic Games on something like Roblox, and by the way, the U.S. Open Tennis has done this 2 years in a row, well, they might be inspired enough to say, wow, I really like this. Where can I get more of this? Now, of course, they can get more on TikTok and Instagram, but ultimately, they're hoping they go to this thing called NBC. And I say that half kiddingly because, for the most part, younger generations aren't consuming traditional television. And now all of a sudden you've introduced the Olympics through something like Roblox, but inspired them enough that now they're actually tuning in and watching it on television, which is still a huge goal for an entity like NBC that's paying billions of dollars for the rights to the Olympic Games. They still have to drive eyeballs to the TV. And as audiences like me get older, they need to then, how do we get younger fans? Because they need those younger fans.
Yeah. And I think because of the social media also, like this thing has changed. So what happens is, I don't want to call it parasocial relationship. I just want to call it a good social relationship which people have with the influencers. And it becomes too authentic with that. Like influencer, like it means that they influences them. So even if they're coming up with something like the Prime, like it got famous in like overnight. And I know a lot of brands. I'm also trying to build similar brand around that. And that is something like, I believe that if you do the correct marketing and like tap the correct point in the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, you can easily make sales out of it.
Alpha, Gen Z, all that stuff.
Yeah. So let me like come up to the important questions. Important questions, like which people really talk about. So firstly, I want to know, like, what's the relationship between boomers and Gen Z? Like, there are people, Gen Zs are like very revolt against boomers. Boomers revolt against Gen Z. Like, they say that Gen Zs are not like very punctual. They're not on time. They're very lazy and all that kind of stuff.
One of the points we try to make in one of the most recent books, Win the Job and Thrive in a Multi-Generational Workplace, and the point I try to make every time I present is every generation brings great value to the workplace, and I think that's really important.
Yep.
So, an old Gen Xer like me or a boomer, right? Well, what do we have? We've got years of experience, successes, lesson learned, failures, big networks, right? Nothing against Gen Z. They don't have any of that.
Yep.
Gen Z has great tech acumen, right? They understand latest and greatest when it comes to platforms and all those good things that I may not understand at all. But they don't have, lots and lots of experience. They don't have, they can't point and say, well, here's a bunch of campaigns that I created, and, or here's lessons I've learned. Their networks are growing, but they're not huge networks. And so those are just two areas where I'm like, each of them, though, brings value to the workplace or brings value to an organization. So I think it's important, for lack of a better word, we should all get along, right?
Yeah.
We should all get along because we all bring value. And then you didn't mention millennials, but I do want to mention millennials if you don't mind. So if I'm brought in by a company to talk about kind of multi-generations in the workplace, I start with that idea that every generation brings value. And I go through those things I just talked about. But I say, to me, millennials in 2025 and beyond are what I call the MVPs of the workplace, and there's a reason why. They're managing up and they're also managing down. So, their bosses may be a Gen Xer, might even be a boomer, right? Well, they aspire to get to that spot, right? Some millennials may already be in that spot, but they aspire. So they still have a career trajectory where they're looking to promote, evolve, and grow. But then they've just been told, oh, by the way, there's this new guy who just showed up. He's a Gen Zer. You're in charge of him too, right? Or her. You're in charge of bringing that generation, this new generation of worker employees into the workplace, mentoring them, managing them, grooming them, helping them evolve. So millennials right now are in this, to me, this pressure situation where they're not necessarily maybe leading the company, but they're getting there. But they've also now just inherited a whole generation called Gen Z. And so I always say, millennials to me are like the bridge. And if that bridge breaks, we're all in trouble. Because again, they're managing up, they're managing down. So I'm not a millennial, but I give great credit to millennials, and I say you are the MVPs right now, and you are holding that company together. Because again, all that you're doing, you're leading business, you're leading your whatever it is, your accounts, you're leading your clients, all those things. But you're also mentoring and managing this new kind of generation, Gen Z, and you're reporting to the C-suite, which might be Xers and Boomers. So it's a fascinating time in the workplace.
Yep.
But again, the message I always come back is every generation. Gen Z, millennials, X, boomers, and even if there's members of the silent generation, which would be late 70s, they all bring value to the workplace. So we have to complement each other, and we have to, as opposed to conflicting with each other, let's complement, let's work together.
Yeah, I think I also believe this thing. But what do you say to these people who are Gen Zs and they say, because you are a professor at Rutgers, right? And there are a lot of Gen Zs, especially Gen Zs, they say that college degree is a waste of time sometimes.
Well, I've gotten that interview. I've had that question asked of me by journalists. And we could spend 3 hours on this right now. But I use the example of, because at the time there was a 18-year-old high school student who I knew who was like, I'm not going to go to college. I know social media. I'm going to create my own little social digital media company. I said, that's great. Do you know how to write a business plan? No. Okay. Do you have contacts? No. Do you have relationships? No. All right. Well, you can start I'm sure you'll be able to launch your little company. I don't know where it's going to go in 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So then I flip side. I said, the university experience, hopefully my former students agree, the university experience isn't just about those classes you take. It's about the network you're building. It's about the relationships you're building. It's about a guest speaker who walks in the door who might end up hiring you for a job. It's about all of those things combined. It's the collective experience. So it's not just about the 5 courses I took in the fall and the 5 in the spring. That's a piece of it. But it's all those other things, right? So I go back to that example. If you graduate high school, you're 18 years. I'm not saying you can't be successful. I don't mean that. But your network is minimal.
Yeah.
You don't really have a lot of relationships or anything, so to me the university college experience is all of those things combined. that goes well beyond just the courses you take and the degree you earn. It's every relationship you build. It's every connection you make. It's every. Oh, by the way, a place like Rutgers, which I'm very proud of. I always tell my students we have hundreds of thousands of alums that comprise what I call Rutgers Nation.
Yeah.
They're actually working where you may want to work, and it's this Rutgers connection that's going to open the door and get to them. And that's the Rutgers connection. Other universities can make the same claim, but the point is, you don't have any of that. You don't get any of that if you're just going to graduate high school and start your company. Which again, I'm not saying you can't do that. I love it, but there's a whole piece of this. So I think when people make that claim of, well, do I need a degree? I think they're like, they have a narrow focus on, well, do I need to take these classes or these courses or what they can do for me? And to me, it's not about that. It's the full experience. I'll go back real quick. I've had guest speakers who've come in the classroom. I bring in a lot of guest speakers into my courses. I probably bring in 40 to 50 each semester to the courses I teach. So these are, CMOs, CEOs, and others. I've had guest speakers come in and hire someone 24, 48 hours later after they've been in there because a student walked out, was proactive, shook their hand, set up a Zoom meeting. Next thing you know, I just got hired. Like, that's not happening. This executive's not coming to your home. So anyway, I get that question quite a bit.
I think that's my story too. Like I told you that I'm working at EY right now. So my professor, who was ex-senior partner, he's the one who set up the department which I'm working in, and he's retired right now. He's the one who referred me. So if I was not in his class and if I was not connecting with people through him, I think I won't be like.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Like, you can trace your the trail back.
Yeah.
And this one particular professor had an influence, and he had such an influence that he helped you open a door that led to where you are now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think that's why I think I saw your interview where you talked about this because you have worked in FIFA, you have worked in Olympics, and now you're helping Gen Z. Like, I just feel like you're secretly Ted Lasso.
Well, I'm a big Ted Lasso fan. And so on the first and last day of class, I usually offer 4 or 5 pieces of advice to my students.
I would love that if you can.
Yeah, so I'll give you the longer version real quickly. The first is that each and every one of us has our own personal brand. Your brand is coming through in your podcast and other things, but right, we each have our own personal brand. And we need to each and every day be the chief marketing officer of our brand. Each of us has our own personal brand, and each and every day you should think as the chief marketing officer of your brand. What am I doing today to evolve my brand, advance my brand, market my brand, right? Whether that's a LinkedIn post, whether that's starting my own podcast, which some of my students have done, whether that's going to that career fair, whether that's setting up a cup of coffee information, whatever it is, right? So again, each of us has our own personal brand, unique personal brand, and we should be the chief marketing officer of that brand. So that. 2, what's your passion? What do you love? What do you want? I love music. I love entertainment. I love beauty. I love travel. I love sports. Pursue it to the fullest. Yeah. You can have a career in that industry, whatever it is. So what is your passion? I never ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm not sure what I want to do when I grow up, but I always ask, what's your passion? And the students, they'll respond. I love music. I love entertainment. I love sports. I love beauty. I love whatever it might be. Next, this is where the Ted Lasso comes in. From the famous scene where he's playing darts, is consistently be curious and ask questions, because those questions will lead to answers that will open doors for you. There's a famous Ted Lasso scene, which I'm sure you know, where he's playing the billionaire in darts, and Ted ends up winning, right? And turns to him and said, "Well, if you were curious, you would have asked me.
Yeah.
Have you ever played darts before, Ted?" "Yeah, I've been playing ever since I was a young boy, with my dad."
Yeah.
So the point is to consistently be curious and ask questions as a student, and well beyond that. Ask students of questions of guest speakers, ask questions of alumni, ask questions of mentors and managers and all that. And then the last 2 are, I truly believe in, and I know some people may look at me and say, I don't know, but I truly believe in it. One is just, dream big, dream big. So you have a passion, you want to get someplace, well, dream really big, and then the last is anything is possible. Yep. Anything is possible. I'll do a really fast story. I don't think she'll mind I'm telling the story. So one of my former students, Lindsay, she graduated 2015, I believe. So her passion was media and sports. So media company, ESPN, Fox Sports, NBC, and sports, right? That was her passion. So that was her passion. She pursued that passion, and fast forward exactly 10 years today, she's now the director of Olympic Games advertising for NBC Sports. That to me is pursuing your passion, dreaming big, anything's possible. And she's not done dreaming because she's only 10 years in her career. So where might she be 15, 20 years? Yeah. But I think it's a really just a good example of someone who had a passion for media, big media company in sports, pursued that passion, and is now in a really great role, and will continue to evolve and grow. But so that's what I always offer that day one, and I try to also, as we close out the class at the end of the semester, remind everybody of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And because this thing which you said, like asking curious questions, I think if you're not curious enough, you won't be able to know the person also. You can't build a relationship. Correct. And you can't know yourself. That's if you don't ask good questions. You should know yourself. Like if you don't ask, you won't know.
Correct.
That's why so this is what I do. I reach out to everyone. And I know that, okay, these are the people I want to do. I have like 100 names and I have like, okay, these are the 30 people I want to do podcasts. Not 30 of them reply to me, right? But I just, even if I don't ask, it's a no.
Yes.
Even if I ask, like there's a yes and no, like 50% probability, I'm getting that kind of probability. That's a good bet for me. Yeah. So I just reached out to you. I just reached out to a lot of people. Some say yes, some say no, but
no, I love it. You're consistently curious. You're always asking questions, and I love that you've identified individuals who you want to interview and converse with, and you're having those through this podcast. So I find everything that you're doing is just fascinating.
And actually, I love that. If the cameras were like on, I would have gone for like another hour. But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love the way you talk. I love the way you express and articulate your points. And the storytelling is the best part about you. So I hope that people will be